Chapter 1, Section 3, we're going to go over real numbers and the number line. This is going to be your learning target for today, real numbers and the number line. Let's first talk about perfect squares. What is a perfect square? Well, before we worked on last chapter, we worked on powers, right? So if we said 2 squared, all right, then we knew that this was a power, and this equals 4. Perfect squares are whatever combinations we can come up with perfect squares. So we're going to do a couple of them, and if in class, if you take a look up above the whiteboard, you're going to see I have the whole list of perfect squares and their radicals. In other words, when you take the square root of a perfect square, then you get, or I should say, you get the square root of a number that's comes from a perfect square. There you go, you got your number. So let's look at 1. 1 squared equals 1. 2 squared equals 4. 3 squared equals 9. 4 squared equals 16, and on down. We can also say the square root of 1 equals 1. The square root of 4 equals 2. The square root of 9 equals 3. Square root of 16 equals 4, and on down the line. If you take a look at number 1 in our questions here, you're going to see that number 1 is asking you which numbers are perfect squares. Well, let's take a look. If we take the square root of 1, which we've already done, square root of 1, it equals 1. That is a perfect square. So square root of 1 is 1, or square root of 1 or 1 is going to be one of the perfect squares. Let's take a look at 100. If we take the square root of 100, it equals 10. So yes, that's another one that's a perfect square. Take some time now to go through the rest of these numbers. Go ahead and shut the video off now and find all the perfect squares listed under number 1. Alright, you should have gone through and you should have taken a look at some of them. You're going to find that the square root of 12, that doesn't come out to a perfect square. That comes out to some number, 3 point something. Okay, so it's not a perfect square. 121, actually the square root of that is 11, so yes, that is a perfect square. The square root of 16 is 4, so yes, that's a perfect square. The square root of 200, well, that's going to come out to some number with decimals. That's not a perfect square. The square root of 20, well, you're going to find that's 4 point something 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 decimals. That's not a perfect square. And you're going to find the square root of 289 equals, the square root is 17. You've just found all your numbers. All right, number 2 in this section, we're going to take a look, and it's asking you, what is this number squared? In other words, we're going to look down this left column right here, and we're going to say, what is this number squared for these first 4? Well, we know 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4. Take a look at the chart up above my whiteboard. That'll help you. 3 squared is 9. 4 squared is 16. 5 squared is 25. What is the square root? In other words, now we've got our square. We have to take the square root of 36. That is 6. Let's go up here. We know that 7, the square root of that is 49. What's the square root of 64? 8. What's the square root of 81? 9. What would be the next number? If we went 7, 8, 9, we'd have 10. 10 would go in this box. The square of 10 is 100. The square of 11 is 121. And then we'd have 12 in this box, and the square of 12 is 144. Remember to take a look at the squared charts above the whiteboard. This is going to help you tremendously. That's also there to help you as we're going through class. That's why I bought those posters, so you guys can get helped as you go through class. Number 3 on our sheet. It says, what is the simplified form of square root of 64? Well, circle the equation that uses the positive square root of 64. Which one of these? 16 times 4 is 64, but is that a square root? Are those squareds? In other words, are they equal? No. 32 times 2 equals 64, but 2 and 32 are not equal, so it can't be a positive square root. But look at 8 times 8 equals 64. There's a square. 8 squared, right? So we can say that 8 squared equals 64, or 8 times 8 equals 64. Number 4 asks us, what is the simplified form of square root of 64? Well, what is the simplified form? It's this number right here. It's this base becomes the square root of 64. All right, you saw me before say the square root of 20 equals 4 point something 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 decimal, right? You saw me do that before. How did I come up with that so quick? How did I know it's 4 point something? I'm going to show you on a number line how this works. Let's look at my piece of paper that I've got here first. I'm going to do a number line, and I'm going to put in my perfect squares. I'm going to say this is 9, this is 16, this is 25. Okay, so I've got 3 squared here, 4 squared here, 5 squared here. Where does 20 fall in? It falls in somewhere between 16 and 25. Let's say right in here. Okay, there's 20. If you go back to the square that was just before that, in other words 4, you'll know that it's going to be 4 point something in here will be the square root. If we did the square root of, let's say, 30, or as they have on a page here, let's do this right now. Let's redo our number line, and we're going to take the square root of 34. We're going to do our number line. What are the perfect squares that are around 34? Well, we know that 36 is one, and that's 6 squared. And we know that 25 is the next one down because that's 5 squared. And 30 lands probably somewhere, or 34 lands somewhere right up in here. Let's say this is 34. Okay? Can we just estimate where our square might be? Well, you got to realize here between this one and this one is 9 spots, and between this one and this one is 2, right? This is 2, this is 9. So it's going to be weighing heavier towards the upper part of this root. So I'm going to say it's probably something like 5.8 maybe, as a guess. Take your calculator out. If you have one on your phone, go ahead and use it. And take the square root of 34 and find out how close did I really come to the actual answer just by estimating where it fell on my number line. Let's do this one more time. Let's take another one. Let's say we had the square root of 40. Okay, what are my perfect squares? I'm going to do a number line. I know that 36 is a perfect square, and that is 6 squared. And I know that if I go up to 7 squared, that's 49. That's sitting up here. Now, if I look on it, I'd say, well, 40 is probably going to fall somewhere right in here, right? Here's where 40 is going to fall. What's my difference here? My difference here is 4, and my difference here is 9. So maybe a little bit more than 6. I can say 6 because I'm going to start here at my lower perfect square, and I'm going to say 6 point, and I can actually come pretty close if I figure 4/9. And this, I'm sorry, it would be 4/13 because there's a 13 number difference here, right? If I did 4 divided by 13, I would be right on. So if I said this here, 6 and 4/13, I would be pretty accurate to what the square root is. I don't know what 4/13 come out to. Let me grab my calculator real quick. I'll take a look. 4 divided by 13 is 0.3076, so I would say it's 6.3076. Get your calculator out and see if I'm right with that. Let's take a look now at rational numbers, and let's read what it says. A rational number is any number that you can write in the form of a over b, where a and b are integers. Now integers means there's no decimals on them, and b is not a 0. A rational number is a decimal form, is either a terminating decimal such as 5.45 or a repeating decimal such as 0.33333, which you can write as 0.3 extended. So if we take a look at number 8, let's see which one of these actually works out. Well, pi is 3.14 blah, 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 blah. Does it repeat? No, it never repeats. And it keeps on going, right? So this is not a rational number. We can cross out pi. What is negative 7/4? Take your calculator out and go 7 divided by 4. Is that a repeating number? No. It's 1.75, and with a negative in front of it means it's negative 1.75. Is that a rational number? Yes, it is. How about the square root of 5? Do you think you could find the square root of 5 without using your square root on your calculator? I'll bet you'd come pretty close if you did, but if you want to, use your calculator and put in the square root of 5. Does it continue and never stop? Right? I want you to work on the square root of 5. I want to do the 0.9 continuing and the 7.35. Are any of those not rational numbers? Go ahead and work on that, and we can go over it in class.